Today, we take a deep journey into a side of America that many people drive past without noticing. Hidden behind highways, strip malls, and tourist attractions, there are American towns that were once full of life. Places with steady jobs, crowded neighborhoods, and thriving industries. But now, these same towns face a very different future. A future where main streets are quiet, schools close their doors, and entire neighborhoods sit abandoned. Some of these towns have already lost more than half their population. Others are on track to lose even more. And by the year 2050, many experts believe they could become ghost towns. In this documentary, we're exploring 10 American towns that are shrinking so fast, their future as functional cities is uncertain. From Rust Belt steel towns to river ports, from civil rights landmarks to forgotten industrial hubs, each place has a unique story. But the pattern is painfully similar. Industries collapsed, people left, tax bases evaporated, and the towns struggled to survive. If you care about forgotten America, abandoned neighborhoods, Rust Belt decline, and the question of what happens when a city slowly dies, this is a journey worth taking. Let's begin our exploration with number 10. Number 10. Niagara Falls, New York. Most people know Niagara Falls for the thundering waterfall that draws millions of visitors every year. The Canadian side has casinos, hotels, restaurants, neon lights, and a polished, theme park-style tourist district. But cross the bridge into the American side and the story changes dramatically. While the waterfall itself is stunning, the city surrounding it has endured decades of population loss, economic stagnation, and widespread abandonment. Many Americans don't realize that Niagara Falls, New York, once had more than 100,000 residents. During the industrial boom of the 1960s, it peaked at over 102,000 people. Factories lined the river, chemical plants and power plants provided jobs, and neighborhoods were full of families. But after the mid-century boom, the collapse began. Industry declined, chemical companies shuttered, and suburban flight drained the city. By 2020, the population had dropped below 50,000 tons. That means the city lost more than half its population in 60 years. Today, entire blocks show signs of long-term neglect. Abandoned houses, boarded windows, cracked sidewalks, and neighborhoods that look frozen in time. Despite millions of tourists passing through the region, the economic benefit barely reaches the local residents. High taxes, limited job growth, and aging infrastructure push families to suburbs like Wheatfield and Lewiston instead. Even the presence of hydropower hasn't been enough to rebuild the city's broken economy. If current trends continue, Niagara Falls may survive mainly as a small tourist bubble, surrounded by large areas that are increasingly empty. Number 9. Helena, West Helena, Arkansas. Sitting along the Mississippi River, Helena, West Helena is a place with a deep musical legacy and a rich agricultural history. Once known for blues culture, river commerce, and fertile farmland, this town struggled through decades of economic decline. Agriculture became automated. River jobs disappeared, and younger residents sought opportunities elsewhere. By the early 2000s, the city's population dropped dramatically. For context, the area once had more than 15,000 people. But by 2020, the population had fallen below 10,000. And projections show continued decline. When you drive through the city today, you'll find empty storefronts, shuttered gas stations, and residential streets with more vacant lots than homes. The commercial corridors that once had grocery stores, hardware shops, restaurants, and local businesses now feel hollow. Many buildings sit boarded up, while others crumble under decades of neglect. Healthcare facilities are limited. Schools face shrinking enrollment. Infrastructure, from sewer lines to roads, is aging and expensive to maintain. Without a strong tax base, the city cannot fully fund repairs. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Fewer jobs mean fewer people. Fewer people mean less tax revenue. Less revenue means reduced services. Reduced services push even more families to leave. If the current trend holds, by 2010 Helena West, Helena may become a scattered collection of surviving pockets surrounded by grassland reclaiming old residential areas. The Mississippi Delta is full of once vibrant towns that faded over time. And unless a major economic shift happens, this one will continue to shrink into the landscape. Number 8. Selma, Alabama. Few cities in the United States carry as much historical significance as Selma. The marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge during the Civil Rights Movement changed the course of American history. But history alone cannot sustain a city's economy. Modern Selma faces deep challenges: high poverty rates, limited job growth, crime problems, and a rapidly shrinking population. In the 1960s, Selma had around 8,000 residents. It was a thriving regional center with busy streets, vibrant communities, and a strong cultural identity. But over the decades that followed, people left in large numbers. Manufacturing slowed down. Younger families pursued opportunities in Birmingham, Montgomery, Atlanta, and other growing cities. Today, Selma's population is closer to 10,000 and continues to fall. Infrastructure is aging. Water systems need major upgrades. Roads show signs of long-term wear. Public schools face declining enrollment and limited funding. Homes and businesses sit empty in many parts of the city. Urban decay is visible in the abandoned storefronts and residential blocks that once thrived with activity. Despite its importance as a historic landmark, Selma struggles to retain residents. Tourism spikes during anniversaries of major civil rights events, but most visitors don't stay long enough to meaningfully boost the local economy. By 2050, Selma could look more like a preserved historical district surrounded by quiet neighborhoods and empty lots, a place visited for its past but struggling to maintain its present. Number 7. McKeesport, Pennsylvania. Now we travel north to one of the clearest examples of America's Rust Belt decline, McKeesport, Pennsylvania. This city grew during the golden age of steel. Massive mills along the Monongahela River employed thousands. Neighborhoods were filled with steel workers, families, and generations of residents who proudly built American industry. But when steel collapsed in the 1960s and 1980s, McKeesport was hit hard. Jobs disappeared almost overnight. Businesses that depended on mill workers closed down. People moved to Pittsburgh, to surrounding suburbs, or out of the state entirely. The population fell from over 50,000 at its peak to under 18,000 today. Walking through McKeesport, you'll see the remnants of that industrial era. Huge abandoned factories, rusted rail lines, empty warehouses, and long rows of houses that stand silent. Some neighborhoods are nearly deserted, with nature reclaiming entire blocks. Ivy climbs over old porches. Trees grow through collapsing roofs. Streets that once echoed with factory horns and lunch break crowds now sit mostly quiet. Efforts have been made to revitalize the city: community arts projects, small business grants, downtown renewal initiatives. But no revival has matched the scale of what was lost. You simply can't replace a giant industrial employer with a few cafes or boutiques. And without a major economic engine, the population continues to fall. By 2050, McKeesport may resemble a series of small inhabited zones surrounded by open land where entire neighborhoods once stood. Number 6. Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Another Pennsylvania town shaped and scarred by the past is Johnstown. This city is known for two things: industrial boom and devastating floods. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Johnstown was a thriving steel and coal town. But after the mid-century, it began losing jobs just like McKeesport. On top of economic decline, Johnstown suffered repeated natural disasters, including the infamous Johnstown floods, which destroyed large portions of the city and discouraged new investment. In 1920, Johnstown had more than 60,000 residents. Today, that number is closer to 18,000. The decline is visible everywhere. Empty homes, aging infrastructure, and public services struggling to keep up with reduced budgets. Some residents remain deeply loyal to the city, but younger generations continue to move away in search of opportunity. Driving through Johnstown today, you can feel the weight of history. Older buildings stand as reminders of a vibrant past. but many now sit abandoned or underused. Schools have consolidated. Businesses have closed. Hospitals and public services operate under budget pressure. Without new industries or significant redevelopment, the population is expected to keep falling. By 2030, Johnstown may be more memory than metropolis, small clusters of residents surrounded by large stretches of quiet streets and empty parcels. Number 5. Portsmouth, Ohio. Along the Ohio River sits Portsmouth, a town with a long history of manufacturing, river trade, and blue-collar pride. For much of the 20th century, Portsmouth had stable jobs and a strong local identity. But in the late 20th century and early 2000s, manufacturing declined sharply. Factories closed and jobs evaporated. The population, once around 40,000, has now fallen below 20,000. Downtown has tried to reinvent itself with local art projects and the well-known flood wall murals that depict the region's history. These murals are beautiful and bring some tourism, but they can't offset the loss of thousands of jobs. Beyond downtown, the story becomes harsher. Vacant homes line many streets. Entire blocks feel quiet. Addiction and opioid-related issues hit the region especially hard, further accelerating population decline. Schools face shrinking enrollment, public services struggle with small tax revenues, and young people continue to leave for Columbus, Cincinnati, or entirely different states. Portsmouth's river views remain gorgeous. The history is rich. But unless a major employer arrives or a significant redevelopment takes place, the city may shrink into a much smaller community by 2010, one defined by a handful of active districts surrounded by empty neighborhoods. Number 4. Chester, Pennsylvania. Located between Philadelphia and Wilmington, Chester should have been positioned for success. It sits along the Delaware River, close to major highways, rail lines, and industrial land. But instead of growing, Chester spent decades losing residents. The city once had more than 60,000 people. Today, it has closer to half that number. Chester's decline began with the loss of manufacturing jobs. Over time, deindustrialization intensified economic troubles. The tax base fell. Crime increased. Schools struggled. Housing aged and deteriorated. Even major investments, such as a waterfront stadium and a casino, failed to bring sustained improvement to the surrounding neighborhoods. As people moved to suburban areas like Chesterbrook, Springfield, and Media, the city's population and economic viability continued to weaken. Many homes in Chester today sit empty. Some neighborhoods feel fragmented, with vibrant blocks next to areas full of abandoned houses. Without strong revenue, the city government has faced financial crises multiple times. If the downward trend continues, Chester could transform significantly by 2050. Much of the old industrial land may be redeveloped for warehouses, shipping centers, or logistics hubs. Number 3. Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff is a city that peaked later than many others on this list. In 1990, Pine Bluff was still growing, reaching close to 57,000 residents. But the decline since then has been steep. Today, the population hovers around the upper 30,000s, representing one of the fastest declines in the country. The reasons form a painful mix: industrial decline, agricultural job losses, rising crime, struggling schools, and a public reputation that scares away new investment. Pine Bluff frequently appears on lists of the most dangerous cities in America. With businesses leaving and little new development coming in, the tax base shrinks, which makes it harder to maintain public safety, infrastructure, and community services. Downtown Pine Bluff still has a few historic buildings, some undergoing restoration, but many others stand empty. Some neighborhoods show signs of complete neglect: boarded windows, empty lots, and neglected properties for entire blocks. Younger residents look toward Little Rock or entirely different states for opportunity. Unless major economic investment arrives or a revitalization movement takes hold, Pine Bluff could lose another significant portion of its population by 2050. It may become a skeleton of its former self, a few stable areas surrounded by large zones of abandonment. Number 2. East St. Louis, Illinois. Few cities showcase the collapse of industrial America as dramatically as East St. Louis. Once the fourth largest city in Illinois, East St. Louis had more than 80,000 residents in 1950. Today, the population has dropped below 20,000. This is one of the most severe population declines of any American city. The causes: manufacturing collapse, white flight, racial tension, political corruption, long-term poverty, crumbling infrastructure, and widespread abandonment. Large portions of the city are empty. Entire blocks contain no houses, just fields of grass and scattered trees. Downtown, once dense with shops and offices, now has only a few buildings left standing. Crime and economic hardship have made it nearly impossible for East St. Louis to attract new investment. Even the roads show signs of decades-long neglect. Many residents who remain are older or lack the financial mobility to leave, while younger generations move to St. Louis or other parts of the country. By 2050, East St. Louis could resemble a modern urban prairie. Large areas of open land where a city once stood. Nature is already reclaiming some neighborhoods, and unless a transformative redevelopment occurs, the process will continue. And finally, we reach number 1. A city at the bottom tip of the state, a place where Illinois narrows down into a point, and two of America's greatest rivers meet like converging timelines. The Ohio River from the east, the Mississippi River from the north, joining together in a massive churning handshake. Once, this spot made Cairo one of the most strategically important towns in the central United States. Today, it makes Cairo something else entirely. A half-abandoned shell of a city. A landscape frozen between what it once was and what it has become. Ride slowly down the 2-lane highway, heading into town, and you'll feel it. The silence, the emptiness, the sense that you're crossing some invisible line between the present day and a place the rest of America has quietly forgotten. Streetlights stand at odd angles. Old motels lean like they're tired of standing. You pass long stretches of fields, drainage canals, and levees, reminders that this land survives only because people fought the rivers back for generations. Welcome to Cairo, not Cairo, Egypt. Cairo, Illinois, pronounced Cairo by the locals. To understand Cairo's decline, you must first understand its ambition. In the early autumn 1800s, when America was pushing westward, this small wedge of land between the rivers looked like the perfect location for a major crossroads of trade. Every steamboat heading down the Ohio, every vessel moving up the Mississippi would pass the point where Cairo sits. Early investors believed Cairo could become a rival to St. Louis, Memphis, maybe even Chicago. They imagined a great port city with warehouses, railroads, factories, wealth, and thousands upon thousands of residents. Land companies bought huge tracts, divided them into neat city blocks, and sold them to settlers and speculators who believed this was the next frontier metropolis. By the 1880s, Cairo had its first rail line. By the Civil War, it was a Union stronghold. General Ulysses S. Grant himself used Cairo as a launching point for operations along the Mississippi. During this era, the town was bustling. Soldiers crowded the streets, riverboats lined the banks, money flowed. People believed Cairo had made it, but almost immediately, the city ran into a problem that would haunt it for the next 150 years. Cairo was built on low, flat land, the kind of landscape that looks fine on a sunny day, until a heavy rain turns the ground into a sponge. The Mississippi and the Ohio didn't just meet here. They threatened here. Floods were constant. Spring thaws brought danger. Every few years, the rivers would push against the levees with terrifying pressure. The city built higher levees, then stronger ones, then more complicated systems of pumps, gates, and embankments. But the water never truly stayed away. Floods washed out neighborhoods. Silt and mud buried streets. Property values dropped. Investors hesitated. By the early 1900s, Cairo had become a strange contradiction. Downtown was lively. Theaters, department stores, hotels, barbershops, groceries. You could walk the streets at night and hear music pouring from windows. People crowded the sidewalks. Passenger trains rattled through town. But Cairo was also deeply divided. This was the American South. Inside the state of Illinois, African American residents, many of whom had come north to escape the Jim Crow South, found that Cairo had its own version of Jim Crow. Segregation was strict, opportunities were limited, tension simmered, the city's population grew, yet so did resentment. White residents controlled most of the businesses and political power. Black residents provided much of the labor without enjoying the benefits. Then in 1909, Cairo made national headlines for all the wrong reasons. A lynching, brutal, violent, unforgettable, sent shockwaves across the country. Newspapers printed the story. Activists demanded justice. Cairo became known not for its river commerce or strategic importance, but for racial violence. Many African American families left. Some white families left too, worried that the town's name had become stained. It was the first major population dip Cairo would experience. But it was far from the last. If the social tension strained Cairo, the river nearly destroyed it. In January 19th, a massive rainfall across the Midwest sent the Ohio River to record heights. Cairo's levees strained under the rising water. The river didn't just threaten to flood the city, it threatened to erase it. Army Corps of engineers rushed to reinforce the levees. Citizens filled sandbags around the clock. Workers, soldiers, prisoners, farmers, everyone joined in. Cairo held. The city survived, but it came at a cost. Much of the surrounding land was devastated. Thousands were displaced. Businesses lost inventory. Rail lines were damaged. Roads were washed out. Insurance payouts were insufficient. Cairo began shrinking again. During World War II, the river traffic revived. Shipyards and factories along the Midwest needed supplies. Cairo once again became a transfer hub for materials and soldiers. Money returned. Jobs returned. Streets bustled. For a moment, a brief shining moment, Cairo looked alive again. By the 1940s, the population rebounded over 11,000 people. By the 1950s, around 9,000. By 1960, just over 7,000. Not as high as the 1920 peak, but enough to feel like a town that wasn't giving up. Local businesses stayed hopeful. Schools filled with students. Churches held potlucks and festivals. Workers felt secure. River traffic wasn't going anywhere, right? In the 1950s and 60s, America built the Interstate Highway System, a project that changed the entire geography of American commerce. Interstate 57 was built through southern Illinois, but it did not pass through Cairo. It bypassed the city by several miles. That one federal decision, ink on paper, did more damage to Cairo than any flood, any protest, any demographic shift, any economic downturn. Highways steer the lifeblood of travel. Tourists, truckers, families, freight, money. Cairo was no longer on the main route. It was suddenly an exit, a turnoff, a place you could easily skip. And people did skip it. Gas stations closed, motels emptied, restaurants lost customers, businesses shut their doors. This was the beginning of the long, slow collapse. But even worse was coming. By the 1960s, Cairo was already struggling economically. Then racial tensions, which had always been present, finally exploded. African Americans in Cairo, especially younger residents, demanded equal rights, better schools, hiring opportunities, and an end to discriminatory policing. When a young black soldier returning from overseas duty died under suspicious circumstances in the local jail, the black community erupted. Protests formed. Armed groups patrolled neighborhoods. The white community, in turn, formed their own defense groups. The city split into two worlds. Quite literally. White residents controlled most of the businesses downtown. Black residents boycotted those businesses for nearly a decade. An entire economy collapsed. Store after store went bankrupt. Buildings were abandoned. Families who had lived in Cairo for generations left almost overnight. The population plummeted, and the town never recovered. The numbers tell the story. 1920, 15,203 residents, 1930s, 1950s, hovering between turn 8,000, 10,000, 1980, around 5,900, 1990, around 4,500, 2,000, around 3,600 every census. Another drop. Every decade, more empty homes, more boarded windows, more weeds growing where children once played. Railroads reduced service, factories closed, hospitals shut down, public housing deteriorated until it was demolished entirely. Neighborhoods that once held hundreds of families now held a handful, sometimes none. By 2020, Cairo's population hit around 1,733, one of the steepest century-long declines of any American city. Many blocks have fewer than 3 occupied houses. Some blocks have none at all. Downtown is a skeleton, beautiful old brick buildings with broken windows, sagging roofs, and echoes of a busy past. The post office is still open. A few churches still hold services. A handful of stores operate. A school tries to stay afloat with a tiny student body. The police and fire departments struggle with tiny budgets. But Cairo today feels like a memory walking around Inta's present. A city living in slow motion. A place where the loudest sound is the wind passing through empty buildings. To understand Cairo's fate, you must understand the ground beneath it. Most American towns sit on bedrock, clay, or firm prairie soil. But Cairo sits on something different. Alluvial silt, the soft shifting sediment left behind by thousands of years of flooding. The Mississippi and Ohio rivers have dumped layer upon layer of fine sand, clay and mud here. It looks solid, but it moves, it settles, it sinks. Walk through Cairo and you'll notice it. Small cracks in the pavement. Sidewalks lifted slightly on one end. Old houses tilting just a little to the side. Utility poles leaning at angles they never used to. This land is alive, and it is always rearranging itself. Even today, engineers classify the region as a high-risk floodplain, and the entire city is surrounded by one of the largest levee systems of any town its size in the country. Imagine living inside a giant bowl. A bowl you hope never fills. Stand at Fort Defiance Park, the southern tip of Illinois, and you'll see something spectacular. 2 enormous rivers, different in color and temperature, physically merging. The Ohio usually clearer, meeting the darker, booming Mississippi. The line where they touch is sharp, almost unnatural. You can see the divide. Now imagine those 2 giants pushing against Cairo's borders every single day. The Mississippi River has broken records multiple times. 1920, one of the worst floods in American history. 1930s, the flood that nearly wiped Cairo out. 1973, 1993, 2011 and 2016, modern floods threatening the levees. Cairo lives not just next to water, but below water. When both rivers rise, Cairo's levees hold back millions of tons of pressure, the weight of entire lakes pushing against earthen walls. It's like living behind a dam, hoping it never cracks. ESA Army Corps of Engineers was minutes away from ordering a mass evacuation. Portions of the levee system were straining. Television crews arrived, news vans parked along the river. People feared Cairo was about to be erased. That flood was diverted by blowing a floodway upstream. A controversial emergency move that saved Cairo but destroyed thousands of acres of farmland elsewhere. Every time the rivers rise, Cairo remembers. Most river towns that decline eventually find new identities. Memphis reinvented itself with music and culture. St. Louis leaned into tech, healthcare and tourism. Louisville embraced arts and logistics. Cairo never found its reinvention. It waited for factories to return. They didn't. It waited for the highways to bring traffic. They didn't. It waited for tourism to grow. It didn't. Instead, Cairo's downtown became a museum of abandoned architecture. Walk down Washington Avenue and look at the buildings. Tall, red brick structures with arched windows. Old banks with marble columns. The Remines Hotel, once elegant, now collapsing. The Gem Theatre, boarded for decades. The Cairo Custom House, still standing like a ghost of prosperity. These buildings aren't just abandoned, they're time capsules. Some still have furniture inside. Cash registers, paper files. wallpaper peeling in long strips, shoes left on store shelves, a pair of dusty mannequins staring through cracked glass. Population decline isn't just a number. It's a slow-motion unraveling of community. Think of what disappears when a town goes from 1,000 people to 1,500. Fewer students, schools shrink, teachers leave, families move out, families move, tax revenue drops, roads crumble, businesses close, more unemployment rises, more people leave, entire neighborhoods empty. It's a domino effect. One domino falls, then another, until the city is a grid of streets with more ghosts than residents. In Cairo, you see it everywhere. The hospital closed, once the city's medical lifeline. Grocery stores closed, leaving only small convenience markets. Banks left, replaced by boarded windows. Restaurants vanished, only a few remain. Public housing was demolished. Entire complexes removed. Schools merged, then shrank. Older residents tell stories of bustling sidewalks, of children playing, of packed churches. Now, some Sunday services echo in half-empty rooms. This is the reality of a town fading faster than it can save itself. We mentioned Cairo's racial conflict in part 1. But to understand modern Cairo, we need to go deeper. Because the 1970s didn't just set Cairo back. They knocked Cairo off its trajectory entirely. Here's what actually happened. 19C. A young black soldier named Robert Hunt dies in jail under suspicious circumstances. Calls for an investigation grow. Authorities dismiss them. In 1970s, black residents organized the United Front, a civil rights group demanding equal opportunities, fair hiring, and improved conditions. The boycott begins. Black residents begin a long-term boycott of white-owned downtown businesses. History. Armed patrols. Both sides form armed groups. White vigilance committees patrol rooftops downtown. Black residents patrol their own neighborhoods. Daily confrontations. Gunshots at night. Roadblocks. Businesses vandalized. Police overwhelmed. National news crews descend on Cairo. Tourism collapses. Investors flee, banks close, families leave by the hundreds. It wasn't simply a conflict. It was the unraveling of a city's social fabric. When the boycott finally ended, there was nothing left to revive. Downtown Cairo, once the economic heartbeat, was already in decline. The stores that survived died anyway. This was the turning point. If you visit Cairo today, and many urban explorers do, this is what greets you. Empty streets that feel too wide, roads designed for 10,000 plus people now carry a few hundred cars a day. Blocks with only one house still standing, and sometimes not even that. Stretches of the city returning to nature, trees growing through living rooms, grass covering old sidewalks, wild animals using abandoned homes for shelter. The Custom House Museum. One of the last preserved buildings, a hint of what Cairo once was. The old courthouse, beautiful, historic, empty. The levees, massive, towering earth walls that surround the city like protective arms, or prison walls, depending on how you see them. The bridges crossing into Cairo over the Ohio River feels like entering a forgotten pocket of time. And then there are the people, the few who remain. Friendly, tough, stubborn in a way only those who've seen their town collapse can be. People who say, this is home. Living in Cairo today is a unique experience, a psychological journey. 1. Nostalgia. Older residents remember the glory days. For them, every empty building has a memory. 2. Isolation. With fewer people, fewer businesses, and fewer services, the world feels far away. 3. Resilience. You don't stay in Cairo by accident. You stay because you can endure hardship. 4. Hope and hopelessness together. Some believe a revival is possible, others believe it's impossible. 5. Attachment to land. Even if the city is dying, the place matters. The history matters. The rivers matter. For many who stay, Cairo is more than a town. Urban photographers love Cairo, not because it's dining, but because it's cinematic. Think of cracked brick walls, glowing orange in the late afternoon sun, telephone poles casting long shadows across empty intersections, an old Coca-Cola mural faded to ghost paint, a church bell tower still standing proud over empty pews, a Victorian house with a front porch still intact. But the roof caved in. There's beauty in the aging. There's story in every window. There's history in every collapse. To understand Cairo today, you must look at what's missing, not what's left. Because an economy isn't built on a single factory or a single employer. It's built on layers: doctors, teachers, small businesses, manufacturers, clerks, mechanics, restaurants, banks. And Cairo lost those layers one by one. The factories closed. Small manufacturers who once relied on river shipping shut down or moved to places with better transportation access. The ferries and shipping hubs died. Modern logistics chose bigger ports like Memphis, St. Louis, Paducah. The rail lines reduced service. Some tracks became inactive. Freight that once stopped in Cairo now passes straight through. The hospital closed in the early 2000s. It was a massive blow. A town without a hospital is a town with a shrinking future. Public housing was demolished, not because people moved out, but because there were too few people to keep them open. Tax revenue dried up. By the 2010s, Cairo barely had the funds to maintain basic services: policing, fire protection, road repair. A town can survive poverty. A town can survive decline. But a town cannot survive when its entire economic base dissolves. Cairo's economy didn't collapse in one moment. It faded, year after year, like a photograph left in the sun. If you stand on Commercial Avenue today, once the center of the city, you'll hear something unusual for a downtown. Silence. A deep, soft silence with nothing but wind pushing dust across the road. The buildings around you are tall, elegant, and empty. Some have trees growing out of their windows. Some have staircases leading to rooms that no longer exist. Some have collapsed entirely, forming piles of bricks where businesses once thrived. And then, out of nowhere, you might see a single open barber shop, a small grocery store, a church still holding services, a fire truck parked outside the station, a police cruiser making its rounds. There is still life here, but it feels scattered, fragile, almost temporary. Population 1,500 people. Most live in the northern part of the city, near the newer, slightly more stable houses. Median income extremely low. Many households survive on government assistance, pensions, or part-time jobs. Education system shrinking. Class sizes are tiny. A high school basketball game once drew thousands. Now a few dozen residents gather to cheer on the remaining students. Job opportunities, almost none. Most residents must leave town for work. Some drive 60 miles to jobs in Cape Girardeau, Paducah, or across the river into Missouri. Services minimal. No mall, no movie theater, no major grocery chain, few restaurants, limited medical care. The social reality: everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows who's left. For many residents, Cairo is not just a place. One of the most surreal parts of Cairo lies south of downtown. Block after block of nothing. Empty foundations. No houses, no mailboxes, no driveways. Just grass, weeds, cracked streets, and the outlines of neighborhoods that are no longer there. It's hard to believe, but from the 1940s to the 1970s, these blocks were packed with families. Children walked to school. Neighbors held barbecues. Churches echoed with Sunday choirs. Today, the land is returning to nature. Sidewalks that once carried thousands of footsteps now lead nowhere. Trees grow from places they were never meant to grow. Street signs stand like grave markers, pointing to streets that no longer have houses. This empty grid is one of the clearest images of Cairo's collapse. Not burned, not flooded, not destroyed by war, just abandoned, piece by piece, family by family. Some towns bounce back, some reinvent themselves. Some create new industries, art scenes, universities, or tech hubs, but Cairo's obstacles are different and harder. 1. Geography traps it. The floodplain is too risky for major investment. Insurance rates skyrocket. Developers hesitate. The land is unstable. 2. The highways bypass it. You can't revive tourism or commerce when cars and trucks never pass through town. 3. The population is too small to support revival. You need people for an economy. Cairo simply doesn't have enough. 4. The building stock is too far gone. Restoring Cairo's historic buildings would cost millions, money the city doesn't have. 5. No new industries have chosen Cairo. Logistics, manufacturing, tourism, none see Cairo as viable. 6. The stigma remains. For decades, Cairo has been known not for its potential, but for its problems. This doesn't mean revival is impossible, but it does mean revival would require a miracle. Federal-level funding, massive infrastructure projects, or major companies relocating here. Yet, despite everything, Cairo is still here. Not thriving, not fully alive, but surviving. There is resilience in the people who remain. A grandmother who's lived on the same street for 60 years. A pastor who refuses to close his church doors. A store owner who opens every morning despite barely making a profit. Families who say, "We've been here for generations." These people aren't clinging to Cairo because it's wealthy or beautiful or safe. They're clinging to Cairo because it's home. And that human element, that stubborn, quiet endurance, is something rare. Even if the buildings fall, even if the population drops below 1,000 or shut, even if entire blocks return to the wild, Cairo will not be empty. Not fully. Let's project Cairo forward. Population. If current trends continue, Cairo may have 800 to 1,000 residents by 20th. Geography. More land will be cleared. Some streets may be decommissioned. Nature will reclaim even more territory. Economy. Small businesses may shrink further. Most workers will commute out of town. Tourism might grow slightly, driven by photographers and urban explorers. Infrastructure. The levees will still be maintained, but the cost will strain federal budgets. Road maintenance will be minimal. Some city services may consolidate or disappear. Cairo may become known as a historical cautionary tale, a living ghost town, a town of beautiful decay, a symbol of American decline. Some may move in simply for cheap land or off-grid living. Others may come for the history. But Cairo will never return to 1,000 people, not even close. Imagine this. It's late afternoon. The sun is low. You're walking down Commercial Avenue, the heart of Cairo's old downtown. There's no traffic, no rush hour, no crowds, just you and the ghosts of history. You pass a row of brick buildings, their windows shattered, their doors open to the wind. You look into an old department store. A shelf still stands in the corner, covered in dust. A cash register sits crooked on the counter. Sunlight falls through a hole in the roof, illuminating floating dust like stars in a dim universe. Down the street, a church bell tower rises above the ruins, a symbol of faith in a place where faith has been tested. You reach the corner where the Ohio and Mississippi rivers meet. The water is calm tonight, golden, quiet, the same rivers that built Cairo also helped destroy it. And standing there, you feel time bending. It's as if you're standing at the end of a story still being told. A story about ambition and decline and endurance and the fragility of human towns in the face of nature, history, and change. Cairo, Illinois is not just a dying town, it's a warning. A message about what happens when economies shift, communities divide, infrastructure fails, and leadership ignores small places. But it's also something else. Something surprising. A reminder that even in the quietest corners of America, even in the places almost forgotten, there is dignity, there is memory, there is history, there is life. Cairo may become a ghost town by 2050, or it may continue as a small, stubborn community living on the edge of two rivers. Either way, its story matters. Because Cairo teaches us that cities are mortal. They rise, they fall, they thrive, they fade, but the people who lived here, the families, the workers, the children, the dreamers, they leave behind something no flood, no highway, no decline can erase. A legacy, a reminder, a whisper that says, "We were here." In the end, Cairo is not just a set of abandoned streets or collapsing brick buildings. It's not just a number on a census chart or a cautionary headline about a town that time forgot. Cairo is a reminder that every place, no matter how small, no matter how lost, carries stories worth telling. Stories of ambition, stories of struggle, stories of people who fought to keep the lights on, long after the world looked away. As the rivers continue their slow, endless journey, Cairo stands quiet at their meeting point, battered, changed, but still here. A place caught between what it was and what little it may yet become. So as we leave this forgotten corner of America behind, remember this: cities do not disappear all at once. They fade in whispers, in boarded windows, in overgrown lots, in memories kept alive by the few who never left. Cairo's story is not over. It's simply turning into something different, something softer, something quieter, something only time will fully understand. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a place where history breathes through every cracked sidewalk and every silent block. If this story moved you, if it made you think, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves exploring the forgotten corners of our world. This is Cairo, Illinois, a fading town at the meeting of two great rivers, and a powerful reminder that even the quietest places can echo the loudest lessons.